Hi, good afternoon, my friends and friends on YouTube. My name is Meng. I'm the Jolly Good Fellow of Google, and my day job is developing personal growth curriculum for Google. A few years ago, when we set out to create a corporate university in Google, we wanted to go beyond just teaching people to do things. We wanted to develop Googlers as full human beings. Because we believe that leaders are everywhere in Google, and the best leaders develop themselves holistically. And one of the people whose writings informed and inspired us towards that direction that we chose is our honored guest today, Dr. Annie McKee. Annie is one of the world's top leaders, one of the world's top advisors on leadership. She was named one of 100 best leaders by Business Week in 2005. Business Week called her the High Priestess of Executive Coaching. I'm not worthy. Annie is the founder of Teleos Leadership Institute, a consulting firm with a mission of developing values-based leadership and resonant organizations. She has co-authored best-selling books on leadership, including Primal Leadership with Danny Goleman and Richard Boyatzis. Annie is someone whom I feel truly understands the inner dimension in leadership and organizations. And in person, I found her to have an energy that is exciting and inspiring, and at the same time gentle and compassionate. And it's an honor to know Annie. And my friends, please welcome Dr. Annie McKee. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Meng and Alana, I want to thank you for bringing me here today and for helping to get everything set up so we can have a good hour or so. I really am delighted to be here because it seems that, the last year or so have brought a lot of changes to the world. I don't need to tell you that, but I just want to set the stage a little bit for what I'm going to talk about today. Things have changed dramatically, not only in terms of technology, but in terms of the way we relate to one another around the world. And along with that come great challenges for us individually about how we communicate, how we relate to one another, how we connect, and also organizationally. How do we work and live inside our organizations in a way that we take ourselves and our companies forward? It's not the same as it used to be. It really, truly isn't. When we look at the models of organizations that exist, frankly, in most companies today and have existed for the last 300, 400, 500 years, they're modeled on the Catholic Church and the military. Their pyramids with somebody at the top. In the case of the former, somebody who has a direct link to God. That's not the way it is anymore in many companies. And people are struggling, and companies are struggling about how to live, work, and lead inside these new organizations. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to make it really personal. I want to make it about you. In fact, I'm going to do something a little unusual in a few minutes and break the action, have you guys talk to each other, really get into the topics and try to make them your own. Will you go with me on that? Have a little bit of fun? Cool. All right, let me set the stage about what I'd like to talk about. It's good, if you looked at any of my writings, you'll know I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence. I really do believe emotional intelligence is at the core of effective leadership today. Why is that? Because we need to relate to people differently than we have in the past. We need a much more self-awareness to be able to manage ourselves, the stress and strain of today's workplaces, to dig deep and find our special talents and make sure we can bring them out. We have to manage our own emotional responses to what's going on in our lives, in our work, in our relationship, etc. And we also have to be engaged with other people in a way that allows them to be as effective as they can. Now, what's exciting about this is that people have been saying that stuff forever. I mean, it's so obvious, it's almost silly. But the reality is that there's science behind it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about kind of a holistic approach to leadership. Mind, body, heart, and spirit. And if you can imagine me sort of presenting that to my publisher, which happened to be Harvard, and saying, no, really, spirit's part of the deal. You can imagine that conversation, how it went. But it's really true. Obviously, our mind, you're recruited for your minds, so I've been told. So unless one of you snuck in the back door, you're all pretty smart. But that's not what makes the difference in great leadership. I mean, that sounds strange maybe, but that is not what makes the difference in great leadership. Maybe it makes a difference in becoming a great engineer, but it does not make the difference for great leadership. What does is what I'm sort of facetiously calling heart up there, emotion and emotional intelligence. And I have the word body, okay? What do I mean by that? Does it mean that, you have to be strong and big and, rough and tough? Well, no. But it does mean you need to be resilient, physically and psychologically resilient. And by the way, those two are intertwined. Spirit, okay, I'm not talking about religion, although for some people that is the way it plays out. I'm talking about beliefs and values and how you live them and how you stand up for them even when things get tough. And again, there's some science around this that I'm going to share just a little bit later on. Resonant leaders truly look out for themselves in a positive and professional and powerful way, and they also look out for other people. Resonant leaders take in everything in their environment and mix it like soup until it's perfect. Just the ingredients go in one by one until they're perfect. And the ingredients are personal, the ingredients are professional, and the ingredients are group-oriented. Because if you ever were taught or believed that organizations are successful because of one or two people at the top or wherever, that's not true. They're successful because of us as a group. So with that in mind, I want to take you through a little bit of a reflection. I said I was going to make this personal, and here we go. I'd like you to look at the pictures that I'm going to show over the next 2 minutes or so. And I want you just to think about who these people are. Some you won't know. The images will evoke things for you. Just stay with it for a minute, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about them. You know what, before I ask you to talk about them, I want to tell you a story to bring home how powerful each one of us can be, even if we're not personally connected with another person or another human being. The story I'm going to tell you, despite the picture up there, is not actually about Nelson Mandela, okay? It's about one of the people that he touched. Now, I happen to be very fortunate in that we've done quite a lot of work in Africa, and my husband is Zambian, so we go there a lot, and we've been able to do a lot of work with people from all over the place. And in fact, we were working with the UN. And when you work with the UN, they take security very, very seriously. So you get off the plane in South Africa, for example, and the driver meets you. And it wasn't until the second trip that we realized that the driver was really a security guard and wasn't going to let us out of our sight, and there was a gun under the seat and all the rest of that. So these are highly trained professionals. And we were doing this work for 3 or 4 or 5 years. So we would go all over South Africa in one of those white Range Rovers with our driver, who was called Philemon. And you get to know each other. You find out a little about each other's lives, about kids, about all that sort of thing, because you're sitting in a car for hours on end. So somewhere around year 2, we started getting close. And I remember this one trip, we were driving up to Limpopo province, which is very remote, you might know. And Philemon told us his story of how he came to be the person he was. We didn't ask him, it just sort of came out. You'll remember apartheid in South Africa, of course, and you may or may not know it, but Pretoria was a white-only city during those years, meaning that blacks could not live there. They could only live on the outskirts. Now, obviously, it was a full and vibrant city, so it required everybody to work, and black people were literally trucked in to Pretoria and trucked back out to these, god-awful townships every single day. Well, one day, Philemon got home. His wife rode a different truck, and she didn't come home. And he got the neighborhood looking for her and all the rest of that. She just didn't come home. And they didn't find her the next day or the next day until they finally found her 3 or 4 days in, dead, still on the street, shot by the police because she had been out after curfew trying to make her way home. So Philemon told us what that did to him, and I think you can imagine. He was filled with rage and hatred and, all of the things you can possibly imagine for years. He said it became his blood. That was the way he described it. And his two small boys, who were 12 or 13 when their mom died, also became to be that full of hatred and resentment and fear, too. And they all, in their various ways, joined part of the movement that were pretty violent. So fast forward a few years, and Nelson Mandela's out of prison, and he's traveling the country talking about truth and reconciliation and peace and no civil war. Somebody dragged Philemon to one of these, great big rallies, or 10,000 or more people, and he said he sat on the side. He sat on the edge of the crowd, not interested in this truth and reconciliation and peace. He wasn't interested. He said, but I started listening to the man, listening to his story about what he had experienced and his children, et cetera. And he told me, he said, I don't know what happened that day, but at a certain point in time, I felt that the man was speaking to me, and me alone. All those people disappeared. It's almost like a cloud came over and took them away, and it was only me and him. And he was talking to my experience, my losing my wife, and what I felt afterwards, and what my life was going to be like if I kept on the path that I was on, and what it could be like if I chose a different way. And he said, I don't know what happened, but I changed. That very moment I changed. And I got up off that rock, and I walked into a different life. And in fact, he did. He went to school, and he got connected with the UN, and he ended up being in this good job, and on and on and on. And his kids also became very successful. Now, I don't know that people change in a minute, in an instant, but I do know people change. And I do know they change because somebody touches their hearts. Somebody really goes in deep and finds just that spark of hope, that spark of magic that releases talent and potential and a belief in a better future. So I want you guys to turn that in on your own lives for just a few minutes. Think about the people in your life. It probably isn't Nelson Mandela. It might have been an uncle or an aunt, or it might have been one of your children who allowed you to open up and see your life a different way. Somebody who saw something in you, who relied on you for something, or who really saw what you could be if you gave yourself a chance. So I'll time it, but for the next 3 minutes, just turn around and talk to each other about whoever that person is for you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Listen, the reason I wanted you to do that wasn't only because I wanted you to connect with what it means to be in contact again with whoever that person was, because it was probably a pretty good experience. It's actually related to the topic of how do people change, okay? And I want you to keep this in mind as I go through the rest of this material today. People change when they want to, period. I don't care if you've got the best leadership development program in the world. I don't care if you've got the best teachers in the world, or your bonus is going to increase. People change because they want to, and they usually change when they're moving towards something that's really powerfully and positively attractive to their whole lives, right? Not just their work. And the other thing about this is that generally speaking, when people feel positive emotions, I'll get into this more in a bit, positive emotions like excitement and energy and hope, right? We're more willing to engage in the hard work of change. On the other hand, when we're feeling things like judged, unfairly evaluated, or kind of the incredible, along with the incredible highs at work, those incredible lows that you don't understand, that's when people don't change. That's when it becomes really hard for people to change fundamental habits, such as those that are related to emotional intelligence. So I want you to keep that in mind, because a lot of people will say, well, you can't really develop leadership, you're born with it. You can't really develop emotional intelligence because it's so deep, things like self-awareness and empathy. I don't believe that. I fundamentally believe that people like change, but they've got to be touched or sparked in a certain kind of way. And as leaders here, and I hear everyone is supposed to be a leader around here, that's what you need to learn to do for other people. Touch them in a way that they want to go forward in a different kind of way. Now, it's really common sense what I'm talking about. Resonant leadership is emotional intelligence. It's using your mind, your intellect well. It's using your presence, your physical appearance, and your resilience, and it's sticking to your values. There is nothing brand new about that message. What's new about it is that we know these things can be learned, and we know which aspects of them are really going to change the way you show up as a leader. So let's look at some of those. If it's true that resonant leadership is common sense, why isn't it common practice? We've gone around and looked at leaders, thousands and thousands of leaders around the world, and I hate to say it, but probably only about 10 or 15% would, in my mind, be considered great. And even if I use some of the research and measure them up to, benchmarks, et cetera, it's really low, and that's just not right. Because people get up in the morning intending to do a good job with the people who depend on them, and a lot of us just plain don't, or if we do, we fall down along the way. So why is that? I mean, one of the reasons I think is that we operate on false assumptions about what it means to be a good leader. A lot of us have that old-fashioned model that we tell and somebody does, okay? That we should leave our emotions at the doorstep of the workplace. I mean, that's all hogwash. It's not true. It simply is, and the research tells us that. We need to bring our whole self to this thing called leadership, and we need to let go of some of these false myths that we hold about what it means to be great. Myth number one, smart is good enough. If you're a really good technician and if you're a really good individual contributor, you're going to make a good manager. No, you're not. Otherwise, we'd see a lot of better managers out there. The studies that we've done and our colleagues have done have shown that competencies related to emotional intelligence make the difference. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management statistically differentiate great leaders from their more average peers. Now, you could spend your whole life being an average manager or director, and you're not going to get kicked out of your job. You're not going to get fired. You're just going to be average, which I don't know about you, but that's not good enough. Myth number two, emotions don't matter at work. Well, that's stupid. People are emotional beings. We bring our emotions wherever we go. We can hide them. We can try to mask them. We can ignore them or deny them or whatever, but they're still there, and they affect us and they affect other people. The recent neuroscience talks about how our emotions, in fact, can open up our minds or close our minds down, to get back to why this is important at work. Myth number three, you're a superhero. I mean, you can take anything that the world or work dishes out. Well, maybe you can. The people in this room are probably pretty resilient. You're also recruited for that, okay? And in fact, people who are good leaders are very resilient. But even those of us who are really good, even those of you who are top of your game at leadership, at leading others, at influencing others, at inspiring them, sooner or later, the pressures of the world of work that we're facing today can get the better of us and bring us down. And take each one of these a little bit more directly. Why is emotion important? Well, to simplify the science greatly, we feel before we think. It's a survival mechanism. It's the fight, flight, nurture, and comfort response. When we are faced with stimuli, we process it first in the limbic brain, the thing they call the primitive brain. It's been with us a long time. It's what got us out of the way of saber-toothed tigers and all the rest of that. It's still with us. You walk into your space some morning, and you look over across the hall, and you see a couple of people who are having an argument, maybe a polite argument. You know it's an argument. You're going to bristle up because you're human and because emotions are contagious, and you pick them up. You're going to start feeling the way people around you feel just as they pick up on your emotions. So here's the worst case scenario. You feel, right? and you react. Now let me say that differently. You feel, and then you act, and then you think. Who among us hasn't done that? What we really want to do is to try to feel, and then think, and then act, which is a skill that you can learn. And it's a skill called self-awareness, and it's another set of skills called self-management. Emotional attractors. Of the many emotions we feel, I put a few of these up here. This piece of information is based on the study of chaos theory and applying chaos theory to the interaction of human beings and how emotions impact us. Positive emotional attractors, hope, joy, excitement. It can also be that edgy kind of excitement. It's not just good feelings, it's kind of like, yeah, I got it. Those enable us personally to literally open up our cognitive categories, you know, the way we process information, how we perceive situations, and think more clearly, think more broadly, take in more information, and come up with better answers. Positive emotional attractors, which, let me say this again, doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it's really edgy. Sometimes it's a little bit, you know? Negative emotional attractors, on the other hand, hate, fear, anxiety, extreme chronic stress, which, oh, by the way, a lot of us feel at work today, even though we don't really admit it, we do. Those, on the other hand, close us down. They close down our cognitive categories. They put filters over our eyes and our ears and our nose and whatever else, so less information gets through, resulting in worse decisions, hiding out, bad behavior, and generally an unpleasant person to be around, which, by the way, is, again, contagious. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're talking about something specific. And let me say that there are a number of people studying EI, and we come at it slightly different ways. I'm not one of those people who says our way is the best way or their research isn't great. I just don't go there. I believe the various camps, and there are about 3, including ours, who are studying this thing, are all doing the good work of trying to figure out what it is that links emotion to our behavior. We do it with competencies. Competencies are skills with intention behind them based on our preferences about how to think, believe, and act. There are probably dozens and dozens of studies around the world, as well as about 40 years of studies here in the US about competencies. They are observable behaviors that allow you to be more effective at work, period. And our set allow you to be more effective as a leader. Self-awareness, it's obvious. I know myself, I understand my emotions, I know what I'm feeling, I know their impact on me, and I can manage them. That's number 2. I can manage my emotions for good. So I can draw deep down inside me when I'm having a pretty bad day and find that glimmer of hope that I know is there in me and that I need to spark in other people. I realize that my energy transfers to other people, so I use it a certain way. You can do the same. Social awareness, I want to hone in on one of these, which is empathy. Empathy, okay, I don't mean the psychological term, you know, or the, you may know the name of this psychologist, the Carl Rogers, oh, I know how you're feeling. No, okay? I mean understanding deeply what motivates other people, what touches them, what makes them move, what gets them up off the couch. It's a critical skill in leadership, much underestimated. And then finally, relationship skills, the kinds of things you probably think about more often when it comes to leadership. Inspiration, teamwork, et cetera, all very important, but not possible without the other 3. You can go to 10 workshops at Harvard or Wharton or wherever and study negotiation or influence or whatever, and you're not going to be any good at it unless you're self-aware, you manage yourself well, and you understand other people. You just aren't. Okay, this is fun. I recently been writing a textbook for some of your younger colleagues who are still in college, and I came across some really good research on the link between emotion, thinking, and creativity. Really good stuff. Okay, so if you think about creativity as having a knowledge domain, you know enough to be messing around with whatever you're messing around, and sometimes that's really hard work, and an emotional domain, some people call that intuition, it's not. Okay, scientifically, it is how we process emotion and link them with our thoughts. There are kind of 4 ways of looking at it. First, deliberate and spontaneous is one dimension, you get that. And then there is cognitive and emotional. You know, creativity isn't something that always just occurs to us or happens in our sleep. Sometimes it's a very deliberate process of going back into our long-term memory and understanding what's there and linking it with kind of what, again, most people call intuition. I think I need to go in this way. That's emotional. Sometimes it is spontaneous, and you know, your emotions just burst on the scene. It's like, I know exactly what to do. Now let me go understand what other people say about this and see if I can come up with something. So if you look at this, you've got deliberate and emotional. You've got deliberate and cognitive, right? That might be sort of, you know, the way the light bulb was developed. Test after test after test after test. Years of research, okay? Then you've got spontaneous, both emotional and cognitive. This is interesting stuff. You should get this. There's a whole stream of study coming out about this, and I highly recommend you go look at it. All right, here we go into the fun stuff again, all right? I've been talking about people. I would really love you to walk out of here thinking, yeah, I could do this emotional intelligence stuff a little bit better. That's cool. But that's not enough, and that's because we work in groups. We don't work alone, and you can perfect your EI, but if you never use it with other people, you know, you're sunk. It doesn't help. We're mammals. We sidle up to each other, and we share ideas, and we share feelings, and in fact, we share feelings even when we don't know it. Emotions are contagious. Literally. There are these great studies that have started in Rome, have now, you know, been taken up all over the world, looking what they're calling mirror neurons. Okay, mirror neurons. They are physical structures in our brain whose purpose seems to be, sole purpose I should say, seems to be to mirror the emotions of other human beings. So it isn't just reading body language, it's scientific transmission of feelings among and between people. It's an explanation for what we actually know we do. Now, this is particularly important when it comes to leadership. Why is that? We're mammals. I'll say it again. We're mammals. We look up to the stronger, more powerful beings in our group, and we pay a heck of a lot of attention to their emotions because they can affect our lives. They have power over us, even though we don't like to say that. They do. And it's a dance. You know this dance. When you first met somebody and you're sitting down, there's all that unsaid conversation that's going between us that, like I said, is not just reading body language, it's a transmission of emotion, a transmission of understanding. And it can be beautiful. Half the time it is. I believe the greatest inventions have come out of that kind of communication among and between people. But it can also be dangerous. Dissonant leaders, positioned leaders or informal leaders, it doesn't matter. Dissonant leaders wreak havoc in our organizations. They hurt people. They really do. And you don't have to have a formal manager or director position to be in this kind of situation where you potentially are harming other people. You walk in as a team member in the morning and grumble and groan about something that happened to you yesterday, have that little conversation, and then 10 minutes later you bring it up again. You're pinging somebody off the drawing board there. Okay, what happens? A lot of people say, well, you know, if they didn't do such and such, I wouldn't be having such a hard time. I wish they'd change. Do you know that I've heard CEOs say things like that? You know, it's crazy how people want to look up and find somebody to blame. But the minute you become a victim, you stop being a leader. And other people know it. So if you want to have impact, find another way of explaining what's going on. Either take responsibility, right, or start helping to fix the problem. Now, for me, that's not all that easy. In fact, it's much easier said than done. Because if you step up and take responsibility for fixing the problem, people are going to be pointing at you and calling you them, right? But it's the right thing to do. It's your choice. Resonance or dissonance, it's your choice. It really is. You may say you can't affect things and people are stressed out and you can't get through to them, or maybe you don't have time. You can say all those things, but you know, it's really your choice. You have a lot of impact on the people around you You know, if you just take between now and noon tomorrow and just watch how people respond to you, you'll see how much impact you have on the people here and the people in your life and people at work. So let's say for a moment that you actually get it. You're emotionally intelligent, you have a lot of common sense, you know how to apply it to work, but you start to realize that you might be part of the problem around here. You know, maybe it's at home. You know, maybe things are a little stressed out at home. You say, hey, geez, maybe it is me. Maybe I really need to look at what's going on with me. You say, how does this happen? I don't get up in the morning trying to cause people pain or, you know, make them feel like I don't care about them, but somehow those words just came out of my mouth in this group meeting, and I've just kind of derailed the group, and you see it. How could this happen? Especially if you really are a good leader. I'll tell you how it happens. We often expect ourselves and our leaders to be superheroes, to take anything and everything the world gives us and, you know, just shed it off like Teflon, and we're not like that as human beings. We need coping mechanisms, and we need to know how to handle it, okay? What happens for us is that, especially for good leaders, especially for those of you who are really good at this thing called leadership, you just take on the responsibility more and more and more, and you like it, which is a good thing, right? But put that against the backdrop of a stressful world that's changing a lot, with balancing everything you can think of, from your life outside of here, to a team that you're not particularly attached to a project that seems to be heading in the wrong direction, and multiply that month after month after month, you can start to find yourself really sinking under the burden, no matter how strong you are. No matter how strong you are. And you can really end up feeling this thing called power stress month after month, to the point that, you know what, you just don't have enough to give anymore. You just don't feel you can be at your best as a leader or even as a professional. It's a pretty crummy feeling. We call it the sacrifice syndrome. Effective leadership, daily crises, the world behind us, et cetera, ends up with us feeling like we're really given too much and we're not able to be our best, when in fact we can and could. I know you're all smart enough to be good leaders. Chances are you wouldn't even be in this room if you didn't understand some of the things that go into being really effective in groups and teams and as a leader. So I know you can do this. We've looked at a few ways that can help people, okay? And I mean really practically help people stay in the zone of resonant leadership. Avoid that place we call the sacrifice syndrome. Make sure you can be, you can sustain your effectiveness even when things are tough. There are a lot of ways of looking at that. Our choice has been to look at 3 particular aspects and experiences, really, human experiences that affect us both neurologically, psychologically, and then cognitively. Mindfulness, hope, and compassion. Let me talk about them because they're a little bit unusual topics to be discussing about business leadership. What do we mean by mindfulness? Well, we've borrowed from 2 fields. One is cognitive psychology, okay? Cognitive psychology is the study of how we take in information, how we perceive stimuli, how we organize it in our brains, and then what we do with it, all right? The researchers in this arena claim, based on very good research, that the extent to which we can clearly understand how we take in information, how we organize it, and how we use it helps us to be more effective when we learn, when we try new things, when we're creative, when we're innovative. Cognitive psychology allows us to understand what to do with information. Moreover, this stream of research tells us that if we're able to do this, the work, I can understand, if you can understand it this way, the work of taking in information becomes less. It becomes easier because our systems are more open. That's one side. We've also borrowed from certain aspects of Buddhist philosophy, which, as some of you know, much oversimplified once again, which, as some of you know, is the ability to clear and calm, is the way I think of it. Clear your mind, calm your mind. So put those things together, understanding how your mind works and being open to new information, clear and calm. You've got the basis for understanding what's going on around you and not getting triggered by your emotions quite as much as you would normally. You've also got the basis to, if I can use this word, manipulate your emotions so they work for you as opposed to beat you down. You also have the basis for determining how to face situations so you can both neurologically and psychologically remain resilient, which brings me to the idea of mind, body, heart, and spirit. Mindfulness allows you to pay attention to your whole being, which in our research and in our perspective is the foundation for good leadership. You need it all. There's no segmenting this thing. Mind, body, heart, and spirit together, informed by mindfulness, allows us to have our feet on the ground and know where we're going and understand how to deal with the situations that we can then embrace. Hope. Wow, it's a powerful thing. Any of you who've experienced a loss or a natural disaster or a tragedy in your life, you know what gets you through. It's hope. That belief that the future will be better than the past, that if I put one foot forward, as hard as it is, I'll get there, or we'll get there. Well, let me tell you, it's not only about how it makes us feel. The experience of hope changes our neurophysiology. The exercise I had you do in the beginning about talking about somebody who helped you probably stirred up some feelings of good energy and probably hope. When we are experiencing hope, a key is turned, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which regulates how we respond to emotion, etc., is turned on. What that means is it is countering the effects of our sympathetic nervous system, which is activated when we're under extreme and chronic stress. So as lovely as the idea of hope is, and as much as it's been used in religions and spiritual practices, etc., that's not all it's good for. It actually counters the neurological effects of extreme and chronic power stress. And finally, compassion. It's the same thing. The experience of compassion is endemic to human beings. We are drawn to feel empathy for other people. It's natural. In fact, it may be one of the bases of how our species interacts on the planet. I believe it is. There's some new research that is indicating that, in fact, rather than being the warmongering, horrible beasts that we're presented as in movies and TV and the news and all the rest of that, it may just be that empathy is the driver of most of our behavior on the planet. Compassion, like hope, triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which can help you get through and be the best you can be, even when things are a little bit tough. Now, practically, what does that mean? Are you, Mother Teresa? No, that's not what I'm talking about. Little acts, such as saying, hey, how are you? And then waiting for the response, that's a compassionate act. Asking somebody, how are you today? Letting them talk to you and then actually responding. See if you can perk them up a little bit. That's compassion. Mentoring somebody, that is a compassionate act, whether it's formal or informal. Coaching somebody around a problem at work. Being interested. You don't have to do much to turn this on at work. Okay, I've talked about emotional intelligence and contagion of emotion and how they can affect us personally, and how they can affect our groups. And I invite you to take these ideas in and think about them consciously. Don't sort of stick them down and say, yeah, that's great. I'll work on that later. Think about them consciously. Live a little bit more consciously around your emotions and mindfulness and hope and compassion. Turn that dial 2 degrees and you will be a better leader. You will be a better leader. Give people the opportunity to learn from you. Give them hope. Show them you care. These are practical, common sense, research-based ideas that can help you actually be the change you want to be in the world. And I invite you to give me a call in 6 months and see how it worked out. Thank you very much. I would love, if anyone has questions, I know we're toward the end of our time pretty soon, but if there are some questions, I'd love to take them. If you ask me a question, I'll repeat it back in the microphone so we can all hear. Any thoughts or ideas or comments? Yeah, in the back. Okay, great question. Let me just be sure I heard you. You're asking about emotional intelligence and it being a differentiator between senior or exceptional leaders and average, and how do we assess it?
Yeah, like with interviewing someone technical, it's much easier.
That's great. That is an excellent question. Okay, so how do you assess emotional intelligence in an interview, for example? It's easy to assess technical capabilities usually. It's difficult to assess emotional intelligence, all right? There are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, you've got to turn on your, quote, empathy, okay, and be really watchful about the person's behavior. And the kinds of things you're looking for are curiosity about you, curiosity about the situation. Are they open to looking at the situation and making sense of it? Okay, that would be sort of reaching out and looking. Are they able to express empathy in the form of curiosity? Are they able to express social awareness by how they showed up and what they're wearing and all the rest of that? So you can use your own powers of observation. My favorite way to try to get at the heart of that without a formal assessment is to ask them to tell me a story, a real story, about a situation in which they were expected to lead and the group was very difficult and what they did. And then as I'm listening, I'm coding for the competencies. I'm coding for emotional self-awareness. Did they fly off the handle? I'm coding for self-management. I'm coding for the initiative. I'm coding for the ability to even look at difficult situations positively. So those are some tips, but I want to answer the question in one other way, okay? Formal assessment, in my belief, in my sort of research background, it's impossible for individuals to self-assess their own emotional intelligence. Why is that? If you're not self-aware, how can you possibly measure your emotional intelligence? So we use group-level evaluation when we're trying to assess emotional intelligence. Really, it's other people's opinions, but if you get enough, you've got a hint about where you're going. So if you have the opportunity to do a 360 or to get data that's using emotional intelligence competencies, you're more likely to be able to see that profile. But short of that, using what we call a critical event interview, to having them tell you about an event and literally coding yourself helps. Or you can ask them to write it down ahead of time before they come in and literally sort of qualitative research, code it. That was a great question. Others? In the back, yes? Could you come out so I can hear you? Thank you. Good question. Yep. Right. That's a great question. Okay, the question was about emotional intelligence competencies and mindfulness, hope, and compassion. That's really a tall order. You know, you can't just turn the key and have those things part of your being, and that's absolutely true, absolutely true. There's two answers to this, okay? The first one is more macro. How do people learn, okay? So the first step in the learning process is to make sure that you actually care about learning and you want to. That's the first step. You've got to attach it to something bigger. I'll give you a quick example. This one executive I was working with in Italy, actually, I was coaching him, and he had a problem with empathy. I mean, he was just tearing his team apart, and he was the deputy CEO, slotted to be the CEO, but he wasn't going to get there unless he fixed this problem. He'd been told, you either stop destroying teams or, you know, it's over. And he's like, empathy, how can I learn that? I don't really care about it anyway. Through the coaching process, he didn't. He really didn't. Through the coaching process, I'm not quite sure how it happened because I did not ask him about his family. That's sort of a line in coaching. It came to him that this lack of empathy was actually interfering with his relationship with his wife and most importantly his 14-year-old daughter. this light bulb went off in this guy's head, and he's, okay, I'm getting a handle on this thing. I'm going to do it. And so we went through some processes, which will bring me to the second part of the question, of helping him to see when he needed it and how to practice it, okay? So number one, you've got to figure out why you want to change this thing. Second, you are absolutely right. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to become almost like a helicopter over yourself, viewing your own behavior and emotions consciously and checking when you're going off the path, okay? You also need some understanding of how you can create experiments for yourself and to improve slowly over time and note those markers on some sort of a mental map. And usually that doesn't happen easily unless you've got some help. You need somebody, a friend, your partner, whatever. You need somebody to be in it with you giving support because it's not that easy. And then last but not least, especially when it comes to mindfulness, it's a daily practice. Let me give you some very practical ideas, okay? If you're trying to deepen your capacity for mindfulness, you really think that that's probably the first place to start, which for most people, I believe it is. You can do some really simple things. You don't need to meditate 4 hours a day or take 16 weeks off and go to wherever in a meditation retreat. You really don't. You don't need to do yoga every day. If you do these things, more power to you. What it takes is just a little bit of time every single day where you're not doing the stress routine. You're not making the to-do lists. You're not worrying about what's happening at home. You're not worrying about that project that's running off the rails or whatever. You are quiet. Literally 10 minutes in bed before you get up, emptying your mind, breathing deep, oxygen affects all this. You all probably know that. Makes a difference. 20 minutes walking from one building to another without anybody else, by yourself, not fussing about what's happening next. It sounds so trivial, but those little things make a difference. And as you become accustomed to this habit, you can turn it on instantaneously. Before I get up and do a talk, I'll go over for 5 minutes and sort of, get rid of whatever is there, and then I'm, back to, sort of a nice, resilient place again. I don't want to oversimplify this, but if we try to make it complex, none of us are going to do it. Get out on your bike, go for a run, go for a walk, get away from people, and focus on clear and calm. Good question. Others? Anybody else? Yes? Good question. How do we interact with the people who aren't at this talk, who do not have emotional intelligence or at least don't use it? The first thing I would say is what was on one of the slides. Don't be a victim. Just don't go there, okay? Secondly, build some good fat walls around you so they don't hurt you. You don't let these people hurt you. They're trying to hurt you in some cases. In other cases, they don't know. But in either case, don't let them hurt you because they can really damage your self-esteem. And then the third is don't do it back. If you do it back, you're just facilitating the growth of a beast inside your group. So don't be a victim, boundaries, and don't do it back. And go do good where you can. And the fourth and final suggestion, if it's like that chronically, get out. Just get out. It's not good for you. Thanks. Okay, we're at our time. I want to thank Alana and Meng once more. If we could give them a hand. Thank you. And I wish you all a good day, and I hope to see some of you later and again. Bye.